Hey, I'm Zealous H Plays. Welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo, where today we're going to be here at the monorail station that we built last week, building our first habitat. There'll be 3 animals in here, including one that I've never built for before. I'm really excited to get stuck into that. The Okapi, Bongo, and Red River Hog. And we're going to start off straight away today with a franchise masters. So the habitat we're building today could be described as a basic habitat. It's going to be rectangular. It's not going to have any viewing domes, overpasses, underwater viewing, no architecture apart from a couple of sheds for the animals. But you know, if it's in this zoo, we want it to be beautiful. So how do we make a basic habitat look beautiful? Well, one of the most important things to do is terrain changes, and that is what we're doing here. So we're using the terrain stamp tool, and what we're doing is just slightly increasing the terrain at the back of the habitat to keep the animals in view, and having it rise along the back of the habitat so it's higher on the right hand side than it is on the left hand side, and it's higher at the back than it is at the front. And we'll do it with this tool because this is nice and easy. And then once we've finished using this tool and we've got the sort of basics of what we want, we've got a nice interesting shape, then we're going to go in with the smooth tool and start smoothing off the rough edges and making it look nice and natural. Later on, we're going to cover this in foliage, and it's not really going to be particularly noticeable that there's height changes throughout the habitat, but when you look at it, it's just going to look much more interesting than it would do if we didn't have these here. And that's one of the keys to making interesting habitats without going crazy with all sorts of extra features in it. Sometimes when you've got some hoof stock and a few pigs running about, you don't want a crazy habitat. You want a nice natural looking habitat that you would see in zoos all over the world, and that is what we're going to be building today. All right, looking good. One more thing to do with the terrain is to dig a ditch all the way along the front of the habitat here. So we'll just go down here, and this combined with the barriers for the guests is what's going to keep the animals in. We'll use some of our mud walls to line this and make it look nice and natural. I try and have basically no or very, very little of the game's terrain showing. Try and cover everything up with rocks, mud walls, foliage and everything else, just to make it look more realistic. So we'll put this along here. I'm going to curve it in slightly just to make it a bit more interesting. We don't want too many straight lines here. And then we'll drop in some of our hoofstock sheds that we built for the desert house for our animals. We'll have 3 of these when we're done. And then it's on to a little feature for the front of the habitat, which is some water. The way I'm going to work this habitat is use the enrichment items and the terrain, so that ideally the Red River Hogs are going to spend most of their time at the front of the habitat, and the Okapi and Bongo will spend most of their time towards the back of the habitat. So we want a little mud wallow for the pigs to spend their time in. More on that later. What we're going to do now is start to get a fence together that will keep the guests out of the habitat. So I said when we started Africa that I wanted some consistent elements in and amongst all the different areas that we're going to have within this place. So we're going to be using the Oceania fence that we used in the entrance, but we're going to be modifying it again so that this time it's going to be like a double fence. So we're literally just copying it behind itself, a few vines here and there, and just making a much busier looking fence that feels like it would keep animals in better. We'll put some sturdier fence posts on the ends as well, just so each section feels more like a discrete piece of fence. And then we can just copy it down the front of the habitat until we get to the end. And we're going to curve it around here as well. And how good is the view of the rest of Africa going to be from up here? I can't wait till we fill the area at the top of the screen in. It's going to look absolutely amazing. Next up, it's time for some foliage. So we're going to take the section of forest that we built for the entrance and use this as a starting point for the foliage within the habitat, because I was really happy with how this looked, and it's still very appropriate for the rest of this African forest area. So the Red River Hogs, Okapi and Bongo can all be found in tropical forests in various different parts of Africa. So we want to keep that vibe going for this habitat. I had a few questions about the animal choices for this habitat when I spoke about it a couple of episodes ago. So I've done my research as always, and Okapi and Bongo are successfully being kept together in zoos around the world as we speak. I think there's a couple of zoos that do that. And Red River Hogs, according to their animal care manual, have been successfully kept with both of these animals as well. Whether there's a zoo that's got all 3 of them at the same time at the moment, I wasn't able to find out, but I think it would work if we've got enough space and we've got a decent sized habitat here. We're doing some work here on the monorail just to make sure that this forest surrounds it nicely without causing it to crash into a tree at any point. And then we're going to start working on the other side of the habitat, again using this forest as our basic template, and then making lots of changes to it so nowhere in the habitat looks the same. And you can see it's starting to come together nicely. Next up, we want to do something with all these terrain changes to really sit them into the habitat and make them look good. And we're going to do that with the faux rocks. So we're going to take this rock and we are going to color match it as exactly as possible with the mud walls that we've already used. So it takes a bit of work, but it's really worth doing just to get it as close as possible. It'll just make the whole habitat gel much better if we can get the colors to match. And then we'll move it over and start using it. So I really like the textures on some of these rocks. This one I decided was a little big, so we're going to switch it out for a smaller rock. As long as you keep it selected when you switch it, you don't have to do all the color again, it will keep its color. And this rock has got some really interesting and not too large textures on it, so we're going to use this. And basically we are mainly just going to use this one rock with random rotation turned on, of course, and just copy this all the way around the little parts where the terrain actually changes, so that we end up with this effect where the rocks are holding the terrain back almost like a retaining wall and then sinking down into the ground in front of it. I do want some terrain showing, and we're going to have a lot of dirt here because we've got pigs here, and pigs love to just ruin everything, root around in the earth. You're going to get a lot of broken earth and a lot of mud if you ever see pigs habitats in zoos or just on your local farm. They are messy and they tend to destroy things. So we do need some dirt showing. We also need to make it look realistic that there are height changes in this habitat, because if it's all just mud and you got pigs in there, it's going to be leveled out pretty quickly. So we'll get a few more of these rocks in, and while I do that, I want to talk about something exciting happening next week, which is Planet Zoo's anniversary. It is the game's 4th anniversary next Sunday, I think it is. And traditionally, we get a new free animal on or around the date of the anniversary. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think it might be. Let me know in the comments. We've had the black and white rough lemur, and we've had the red deer. The red deer was a bit of a curveball because there were no deer in the base game, so I think it's really wide open as to what it could be this time. I would personally really like to see another primate added into the game. We are still sorely lacking in small primates. In fact, aside from the capuchin, we don't have any small primates. It would be great to get one of those into the game. Or another one I'd be a big fan of would be the American flamingo. I know we already have a flamingo, but the American flamingo is such a classic zoo animal. The bright reddy pink colouring, it's much more vibrant than the greater flamingo that we have, and also lives in a different part of the world, so I think that would be a really cool addition as well. I have no inside information on this at all. I don't even know if we will get an anniversary animal. This is purely speculation on my part, which is not something I do very often on this channel, but I think it's safe to say there's a good chance that we will get some sort of anniversary celebration. So maybe by the next episode we'll know what that's going to be. Now what we're doing here is adding in one of the forage boxes for the pigs to use. Now normally we cover these up with terrain and natural looking rocks and try and sort of make it invisible, but what I wanted to do here for a change is make it look like it actually has been built and kept here in order to keep the foraging material and the food actually inside this area rather than just having it scattered everywhere by the pigs. So we're going to use some more of the fake rocks to make this look like an extension that comes out of those retaining rocks behind it, and actually have that sort of hexagonal shape in here for once. Is that hexagon? 2, 4, 6, maybe. Maths was never my strong point. But yeah, once we've added the rest of these rocks in, we're just going to rotate these. We get angle snap on, and you can see if we put some more on the other side, we'll spin them round, get them into the right position up here, and then we can just group them and use the rotation trick that we use all the time, and it just fits perfectly with angle snap turned on because this is a geometric shape. And there we go. That's the forage box put in. We'll also use one of these fruit sticks, fruit trees, whatever they're called, and cover this up with a tree root, just so it looks a bit more interesting and a bit less like the default item. And you can still see the little spikes coming out of the rock, so the fruit will go on there for the pigs to eat. And then at the back of the habitat here, we'll put in some items for the Okapi and Bongo, try and keep a bit of separation between the species. Now we're going to fill in the ditch at the front of the habitat with a nice little arrangement of bracken that I've made, just to cover up the dirt and make it look more interesting, and add a splash of green to the front here. I remember when bracken was pretty much the only plant in this game I ever used. We've got so many more better options now. We'll get this all the way down the front here, and then we're going to mix in some other plants and shrubs and sunken trees and things like that, just to make it look more interesting and more natural. We'll get some of those in here. So we're going to use the custard apple tree sunk down into the ground, just so that the tops of the branches are poking out through the bracken. It's a slightly darker green, and that really helps to gel this together. You don't want too many pieces the same in a row, no matter how many times you rotate them. And then we're going to do a bit of work on this tree. So you can see this tree from pretty much anywhere you stand at the front of the habitat if you're looking in this direction. And this branch coming out here is really striking. Just seemed to catch my eye every time I was building it. So I wanted to make it look a bit more interesting. So we're going to cover it up with a load of vines. Just use different vine pieces that fit this branch nicely, like this one here. And get these on some of the lianas as well. And when we finish, we've just got like a little focal point you can see off in the distance there. Just looks really nice and natural. Now I'm going to slightly cheat here. We need loads of facility buildings for this habitat. And obviously in real zoos, you don't really need a keeper hut and a staff room, you know, around every corner. It's a lot more centralized. So we're going to turn around one of the sheds for the animals, cover it up with some more of the mud walls, and we're going to hide all the staff facilities in there so this habitat works nicely but still looks pretty natural. We're also going to put some dead leaves. I love using these. We're going to have these covering the whole habitat to really bring it to life. When I put the animals in, one of the things I noticed, and this is pretty mind-boggling, but for some reason Frontier have given the leaf litter a hitbox. So if you have leaves floating in the water, the animals will actually be stood on top of the leaves. I had to go back in and delete a load of these. I left a few just around the edges where we can get away with it, and obviously the ones under the water are fine. But yeah, leaves floating on water will cause your animals to start walking on water, which is kind of impressive but not really what you want. Next up, we're going to start putting some grass in. We use loads of different types of grass. Remember, when you're in franchise mode, even if the grass or the plant that you're using isn't from the right biome or isn't from the right continent, it only makes like 1 or 2% difference to the animal's happiness, so you can get away with it when you need to. It's nothing to worry about. This area here is a slope as it goes down to the ditch, so rather than using the large pieces of grass, we're going to use loads and loads of randomly rotated small pieces of grass and get a really nice looking grass patch in there. We just need to add one more thing and this habitat will be complete, and that is a fever tree. So this tree has got the exact shape that I want for this habitat. The branches are really high up and the trunk's nice and slim, so it doesn't spoil the sight lines, but it fills in the sort of skyline of the habitat really nicely. The problem is it is bright yellow, which one of the species of fever tree is in real life, but it's not exactly what I want here. So what we're going to do is cover up as much of the trunk as possible to make it a lot more subtle. So we've got some ponytail palms at the bottom. We're going to put some ivy growing down the trunk here. With the ivy, always make sure it's either growing down something so it's on the same angle as what it's growing on, or it's growing straight down. If you have it so it's just sort of dangling in midair and it's not at a 90-degree angle, it looks kind of weird. And then we'll take one of the liana vine sort of arrangements that we've been using throughout Africa. In fact, we'll take more than one of them, and we're going to start hanging these off of the branches here and lining these up so again they look natural and look like they really are hanging off the tree. And we'll get as many of these in as possible and just start to cover up as much of the trunk and branches as we can. And when we're finished, we get something that looks really interesting and we get away from that sort of bright yellow color that the trunk and the branches has, and make sure that these vines aren't going to take up any of the traversable area or anything like that. And that's the habitat done. Let's check it out. I think we can safely say we've made a basic habitat look pretty good here. I really like the way that this looks actually, with a little watering hole at the front, all the plants everywhere. The pigs look really cute running around in it. Buried one of their mud wallows actually into the water, which they use, so they can go in there, and some of the other animals use it occasionally as well. Here's one of the bongos making its way from the back of the habitat, where they tend to hang around most, down to the front. These are really beautiful. It's been a long time since I've seen these in the game. I love the way they actually get covered in mud when they use the mud wallow. That's really cool. Altogether, it's a really pretty habitat. I made some new signs for this area. Really rustic looking, with a nice little Africa sign at the bottom, mostly made from the bark pieces. I think these do a really good job of giving this area its own identity. Let's check out the final occupants of the habitat, the Okapi. Love Okapi in real life. I think these are base game. I think the models aren't quite as good as the current ones that we get in the DLCs, but they still make a really nice addition to the zoo. Just see them in the background there. Because they're larger, I wanted these guys to hang around at the back of the habitat. Hopefully all the animals in here will breed soon, and then we can get some babies to really fill this habitat up. And there we go. This is where we started today, and this is where we are now. The African forest is starting to come together nicely. We've just got one more habitat to put in here. But next week we're going to be taking a break from Africa to build a habitat for possibly the most beautiful animal in the game, taking advantage of one of the new pieces in the Oceania pack that I'm excited about. Here's our members monolith. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see yourself in the zoo. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you again soon.